In 1940, only 1 in 10 American brides received a diamond with their engagement ring. By 1990, it was 8 in 10. Diamonds didn't get any rarer in those 50 years. One advertising agency just got very good at their job and built one of the most successful manufactured traditions in modern history. The company behind it is De Beers, founded in 1888 by a British mining magnate named Cecil Rhodes. Rhodes didn't start out dreaming of romance. He started by renting water pumps to miners during a diamond rush in Kimberley, South Africa, then used the money to buy up mining claims one after another until there was almost no one left to compete with. Kimberley at the time was chaos. Thousands of small claims dug side by side, prices swinging wildly with every new discovery. Rhodes understood something his competitors didn't, that the real money wasn't in finding more diamonds, it was in controlling how many of them reached the market at all. By the time he died in 1902, De Beers controlled around 90% of the world's rough diamond supply. And that's when the real trick started. Diamonds are not actually that rare. There are enough of them sitting in vaults to flood the market and crash the price overnight, which is exactly the problem De Beers had to solve. So instead of selling everything they mined, they controlled how much ever reached a buyer. During the Great Depression, when diamond prices collapsed, De Beers simply stopped selling. They stockpiled millions of carats in London rather than let supply catch up with demand. Scarcity wasn't a fact of geology, it was a decision made on purpose to protect a price. Under Ernest Oppenheimer, who took control of the company in the 1920s, this got formalized into something called the Central Selling Organization. Only a small hand-picked list of buyers, known as site holders, were allowed to purchase rough diamonds directly from De Beers, and only in whatever quantity De Beers decided to release that day. At its peak, this single channel controlled somewhere between 80 and 90% of the entire world's rough diamond trade. But controlling supply only works if people still want to buy, and by the late 1930s, almost no one did. Diamond sales had cratered, so De Beers hired an advertising agency, N.W. Ayer, and gave them one job: make Americans want diamonds again. In 1947, a copywriter named Frances Garrity sat at her desk late one night, exhausted, and scribbled 4 words on a notepad: "A diamond is forever." She almost didn't send it in. Her own colleagues weren't impressed either, since the grammar was technically wrong. Is instead of will be, but that's exactly what made it sound less like a slogan and more like a law of nature. It ran for the first time in 1948. It's still running today. Here's what most people don't realize. Before this campaign, a diamond engagement ring wasn't really a thing. Rings existed, but they were just as likely to hold a sapphire, a ruby, or nothing at all. There was no rule that said it had to be a diamond. De Beers built that rule from scratch. They placed diamonds in Hollywood films, lent jewelry to actresses at the Oscars, and years later invented another tradition out of nowhere: that a ring should cost 2 months' salary. Nobody asked for that number. It just made a good line in a magazine ad. It worked almost unnervingly well. Between 1939 and 1979, De Beers' wholesale diamond sales in the US alone went from $23 million to $2.1 billion, and it didn't stop at America. The same playbook got exported everywhere, tailored to local culture. In Japan, fewer than 5% of women received a diamond engagement ring. In the early 1990s, after De Beers ran its campaign there, that number reached over 77%. An entire generation across multiple continents grew up believing the diamond engagement ring was an ancient, sacred custom when it was actually younger than their own grandparents. There's also a detail most people never think about. Diamonds make for a famously bad investment. There's essentially no real resale market for them. You buy at retail, and if you're lucky enough to find a buyer at all, you sell at wholesale, often for a fraction of what you paid. The timeless value was never really about resale value. It was about the story. Over the following decades, the same company found new rituals to sell, eternity rings for anniversaries, and later, in the 2000s, a push to convince single women that a diamond didn't have to wait for a proposal at all. Each campaign followed the same formula as the first one: find an emotional moment that already exists and attach a very specific, very expensive product to it. De Beers also spent decades managing a much darker problem than bad investment returns. Through the 1990s and into the early 2000s, diamonds mined in war zones across parts of Africa were being sold to fund brutal civil conflicts, becoming publicly known as blood diamonds. The controversy did real damage to the industry's image, and in 2003, the United Nations backed a certification system called the Kimberley Process, meant to keep conflict diamonds out of the legitimate market. De Beers, as the dominant name in the industry, took the brunt of the scrutiny, even though the company itself was never the direct source of most conflict stones. For most of the 20th century, this worked because De Beers controlled both sides of the equation: how many diamonds existed and how badly people wanted one. Then something happened that no advertising budget could stop: a machine. Scientists learned to grow diamonds in a lab. Identical carbon structure, identical hardness, indistinguishable from a mined stone on any standard test, grown in weeks instead of over 1 billion years. Once that technology scaled up, the entire 100-year premise came apart. If a diamond can be manufactured on demand, it was never actually scarce. It was just gated. The price crash has been brutal. Wholesale lab-grown diamond prices have fallen more than 90% in under a decade. By 2025, lab-grown stones made up over 45% of engagement ring sales in America. De Beers tried to hedge its bets by launching its own lab-grown jewelry brand in 2018, then shut it down in 2025 when prices collapsed even faster than they had planned for. Its parent company has written down De Beers' value by more than $6 billion over the last 3 years, and this year even paused production at its main South African mine to cut costs. And here's the part that would have sounded impossible 5 years ago. Right now, in 2026, Anglo American is in the final stages of selling De Beers off completely. Reports put the price at around $1 billion for a company that was valued at roughly $18 billion not long ago. The empire that convinced the world diamonds were forever couldn't survive a machine that proved they were never actually rare in the first place. There's a strange kind of justice in how it's ending. De Beers spent a century controlling supply so precisely that scarcity never had to be real, only believable. A lab finally broke that spell, not with an argument, but with an identical stone that cost a fraction of the price. None of this makes the emotion fakes. Plenty of people mean it when they say forever. But the scarcity, the tradition, the 2 months salary rule, all of it was written by one copywriter in one sitting in 1947, which makes you wonder how many other ancient traditions out there were actually invented in a boardroom a few decades ago by someone with a sales target to hit.